This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets for you. Starting in South Africa, equities at the JSE to continue the strong start to 2021, with today's gain of nearly 0.4% on the all share and 0.5% on the top 40. The mining index, as a matter of fact, up 13% over that period of time, as investors essentially cement the view that a recovery in the long run will boost demand for metals, especially on the industrial side. The index heavyweight Naspers was 4.3% higher on the day. Over the last 5 years, in fact, Naspers shares have done particularly well, up by over 150%. Speaking of things that are doing particularly well, Tesla wrapped up last week Friday with a near 8% gain, but Monday's trading session started in the other direction with a near 5% fall. Since the start of December, though, Tesla shares have risen by over 43% to well over $800 a share. Here's what's coming up next. Bitcoin recorded its biggest decline in 2 days. Investors are seeming to reconsider putting their money in crypto. We'll explore the latest phase of the desert locust invasion, which is posing a serious threat to food security in the Horn of Africa. And the French President Emmanuel Macron is pushing for a Great Green Wall stretching right across the continent. Our starting point tonight, however, is a developing story we're keeping a close eye on in the United States. Republicans over there have successfully blocked a House resolution that calls for President Trump's removal from office by invoking the 25th Amendment. House Democrats have now formally introduced an article of impeachment, effectively charging Mr. Trump with incitement of insurrection, which could be voted on by the full House later this week on Wednesday. You can certainly expect more updates from that on that particular story from our colleagues in the US in the next hour. In the meantime, let's jump into the world of crypto. A steep sell-off in Bitcoin is fueling concern that the cryptocurrency bubble, at least this particular phase of it, may be about to pop. Bitcoin fell by as much as 21% over Sunday and Monday in the biggest two-day slide since March last year. Bitcoin, despite that decline, has more than quadrupled in the past year. And that's evoking memories of the 2017 surge that first made cryptocurrencies a household name before prices collapsed just about as quickly. Prices reached nearly $42,000 on the 8th of January, with retail traders and Wall Street investors all clamoring for a piece of the action. True believers in Bitcoin are arguing that this rally, this time, is different compared to past boom and bust cycles because the asset has matured, in their view, with the entry of institutional investors, and it's increasingly seen as a legitimate hedge against dollar weakness and inflation as well. On to West Africa. In Nigeria, the country is witnessing a rapid rise in the adoption of cryptocurrencies. In fact, now it leads the continent in cryptocurrency usage. More and more people are now using cryptocurrency in Africa's largest economy for business transactions and investments to help them hedge against the depreciation of the naira. CGTN's Deji Badmut has the details from Lagos.
When cryptocurrency operator Luno opened shop in the Nigerian commercial city of Lagos back in 2016, interest in digital currency was nowhere close to what it is now, and the government didn't take any interest. But about 5 years down the line, all of that has changed.
The uptake has been pretty impressive. I was discussing with my colleague, sign-ups we see every day is massive. So people, in other words, it means that people are actually interested in this new technology.
It's the same story for another operator, My Top Exchange, which has seen a massive growth in sign-ups in the past 4 years.
The truth of the matter is, people are actually jumping into this cryptocurrency world or trend. Just one reason: they want to make money, they want to make profit, they want to make astronomical profit.
The adoption of cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, has grown rapidly in Nigeria in the last 5 years. Data from global peer-to-peer marketplace Paxful shows the country traded 60,215 Bitcoins valued at over $566 million within that period. It's the second largest volume worldwide and only behind the US. And it's not only the quest for quick, huge profit that is driving the volumes.
I have customers that they usually make payments to their suppliers using cryptocurrency. Because going through the banking system, of course, for a bank, you have a limit to what you can get in terms of foreign currency. So people just use Bitcoin because with Bitcoin, you can get any amount, well, specifically some sort of amount, and then transferring is not going to be of so much difficulty. It's pretty much easy and frictionless, and the person gets it within minutes, so it's instant.
Several factors are combining to promote the growth in the use of cryptocurrency across Africa. During the national lockdown in Nigeria, for instance, Paxful reported a 30% rise in Bitcoin trade in the country. The vast majority of those embracing the trend are young people.
What we're also doing is focusing on education, because perception around cryptocurrency is still something we're trying to improve on. Some people see it as a complex technology. Oh, I don't want to invest. Some people see it as a Ponzi scheme, right? Oh, okay, I'm not, so these people are criminals and all that. And then other people just think, oh, you know what, cryptocurrency, I don't have the money to invest in cryptocurrency.
And as the crypto rush continues, some experts are quick to warn potential investors to watch out for the risk and hedge against it.
It's a very volatile market, extremely volatile market. Within a twinkle of an eye, it can appreciate and gain so much value. And also within a twinkle of an eye, it can depreciate and lose can lose like 100% of the value it gained yesterday. So that is why you don't invest more than what you can afford to lose.
Despite the risk, digital currency experts project a continued rise in the adoption of cryptocurrency across the continent, especially given the weaknesses and instability around local currencies. And after initially kicking against the adoption, governments across the continent are now beginning to embrace it and roll out measures to regulate the trade in cryptocurrency.
Money is evolving, so it's something that we cannot control. The best we can do is be part of this new technology because it's here to stay.
It's an inevitability many are now resigning to, including governments across the world. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
All right then, so let's dig into the cryptocurrency trend that we've essentially been riding all the way from the first quarter of 2020 to date. To give you some context on that, Bitcoin, somewhere in the middle of March, was around $4,900. As of yesterday, on the 10th of January, which is around $41,000. That's a scale of the trend that we're talking about here. But where do we go from here? Let's find out. Marius Reitz is the General Manager covering Africa at Luno, who joins us on the line at the moment. Marius, thank you for your time this evening. So at one point today, Bitcoin prices are down by over 21% to just about $31,500. What triggered today's correction?
Hello, yes. I think if we look back to 2017, you will see that the bull run during that period was driven by extreme greed, and that led to a massive bubble. I think this time around we've been more steady, and we've seen a gradual accumulation over a 3-year market cycle. But I think even in bull markets like we're seeing now, there are always a few heavy corrections, and we've seen this trend repeat itself 12 or 13 times over the past decade if you look back. I think it's still to be determined whether this is just part of a larger correction. But if you look at the fear and greed index, you'll see that it's sitting at extreme greed levels. And I think some investors will probably start thinking about taking some profits. But I think more importantly, this just shows you that the price isn't guaranteed to only go up. The price will also come down, as we're seeing now. And if you zoom out over the last 5 years, if you're an investor, you will see a clear upward trend. But in the middle, we will always have this level of price volatility.
Indeed. I'm going to ask you to explain a few technical terms that perhaps our non-crypto members of our audience may not necessarily understand. Blockchain halving, that happened in May 2020. Can you explain for us exactly what that is and what effect, if any, that had on how attractive or not Bitcoin was as an asset class?
Yes, I think firstly, cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is a scarce digital asset. Only 21 million Bitcoin can ever be in circulation or in existence. And the main point here is that Bitcoin operates on a model of deflation, meaning gradually over time, fewer Bitcoin will be released until we reach that 21 million supply cap. Now, the Bitcoin halving is a mechanism that manages the rate of supply of new Bitcoin into the market. And this is different from fiat currencies, which use an inflationary model where central banks can print extra currency at will. And I think if you look at countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, these are examples of this strategy. And I think, I think therefore a lot of investors, particularly long-term investors, look at Bitcoin as a deflationary asset. They make the connection between central banks printing additional currency and the prospects of inflation over the medium to long term. And then they take positions in Bitcoin as a hedge against potential future inflation.
I remember one of the things that used to happen around 2017 was this broad complaint that, look, all the GPU supply in the market is just being soaked up by miners. And back then, of course, we had not even arrived at the May 2020 halving just yet. But does that fact that you're getting a much smaller reward for mining activity now, does that make it more attractive or more sensible, if you will, to simply just buy Bitcoin on the open market instead of trying to mine for it?
Look, I think buying, so investing versus mining, it's two different use cases. If you look at miners, you will see in regions such as Asia and the US, where you can cheaply mine because of electricity costs. Miners, they make more profit. And so unprofitable miners or smaller miners, as a result of the Bitcoin halving, have been pushed out of the market because they can't afford, it's not profitable anymore for them. So these big mining companies, they've continued mining, and they've continued to mine most of the blocks on the Bitcoin blockchain. And as a reward for mining, for confirming transactions, they then receive Bitcoin as a reward, and that's the way in which new Bitcoin gets supplied into the market. So we're seeing big miners growing, getting bigger because they can mine at scale. We're seeing smaller miners being pushed out of the market because they are not able to mine profitably because of the halving event that took place.
Indeed, and of course, we're still cracking jokes even in 2021 about how they're triggering a GPU shortage because you can't find any RTX 3090s or 3080s in the market. One last question for you, Mario. So Bitcoin prices did rise in 2020, but what was trading activity like here in Africa? Nigeria, of course, is the largest market for Bitcoin, but what data are you seeing on transactions in South Africa, in Kenya, in Egypt?
Across the board, we saw big increases in new account openings on Luno, and we also saw a corresponding increase in buying and selling volumes. I think in some countries, regions across Africa, where the traditional financial system failed people to some extent, and as you mentioned earlier, due to high inflation or costly payments, people there turn to Bitcoin for things like facilitating payments to continue with cross-border trade. And in other markets, countries with low interest rates, people have been in search of yield, and so speculation and longer-term investment use cases grew. And I think in Africa at large, where money isn't a luxury, it's not a nice to have. People actually depend on money to go on with their lives, to pay for their children's school fees. People tend to become a bit more creative in order to maximize a return or to fulfill a specific need. So they're not willing anymore to pay 10% in commission to move small amounts of money cross-border, or willing to wait for the local currency to depreciate. So they're looking and they're considering alternatives. And I think that's why in Africa, and especially during times of economic hardship, people will always look for alternatives. And we're seeing this growth coming from a grassroots level and especially across the emerging markets.
Indeed, this is a fascinating conversation. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Marius Reeds, General Manager covering Africa at Luno. Time now for run through some company headlines. Top executives at the US pharmaceutical company Novavax have sold roughly $46 million of company stock since the start of last year. The CEO, Stanley Erck, and three of his top lieutenants are apparently waiting to see how well the COVID-19 vaccine works before they cash in on the financial rewards. They're capitalizing on a near 3,000% rally in Novavax shares, fueled by investors who are betting on the success of the shot that is currently under development. In East Africa, the telecommunications giant Safaricom has stopped plans to roll out 5G services in Kenya, saying it's shifting its focus instead to converting millions of 2G and 3G subscribers to 4G instead. In November last year, the telco announced that it aims to provide 100% 4G coverage across Kenya by the end of March. In its annual report for the year ending in March 2020, the operator said its 4G network covered 77% of the country, its 3G network covered 94% of the Kenyan population. The Swedish bus and heavy trucks manufacturer Scania will venture into mass production of high-capacity buses once demand for those units picks up. The firm is readying itself for the rollout of the bus rapid transport system in Kenya's capital. The automaker last week unveiled a 91-capacity prototype bus developed in conformity to the government's specifications. Isuzu East Africa is also eyeing the option of supplying BRT buses. And finally, Dr. Martens is considering an IPO in London as owner Permira Holdings seeks to sell a stake in the iconic British bootmaker amid rallying stock markets. Now, the company doesn't plan to raise any money in the offering. Since paying some 380 million euros for the bootmaker back in 2018, Permira has increased the brand's global presence. It's opened up new stores and it's expanded its e-commerce offering as well. That's it for your company news wrap. About 15 minutes into Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up. The next wave of the desert locust invasion is posing a serious threat to food security in the Horn of Africa. We'll have some analysis. And South Africa's liquor industry is warning of a spike in illicit liquor sales amidst an alcohol sale ban.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Farmers in Somalia continue to count their losses after a new wave of desert locusts destroyed enormous swaths of farmlands in parts of the country. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo is in Mogadishu and reports on how farmers are coping with this enormous locust invasion.
Abdul Wahab Ahmed is inspecting his farm on the outskirts of Beledweyne in central Somalia. A new wave of migrating desert locusts has destroyed farmlands in most towns in this region. This footage shows new swarms swelling, migrating and increasing in number, posing a serious threat to crop production in a region that suffers from food insecurity and flooding.
It has left nothing behind. It has destroyed tomato farms, pawpaw, banana plantations, oranges and lemon trees. We are facing severe losses and this will be felt in the markets. We have produced low quantity of tomatoes, bananas, pawpaws and lemons. Farmers, laborers, traders and transport companies really feel the loss.
Dahabo Mu'min is a laborer at one of the farms here. Her work is to collect grass and sell it in the local market. Business is no longer booming for her and many others. Large swarms of desert locusts consumed huge amounts of crops, placing both people and livestock at great risk.
Locusts have exhausted all that was left for our livestock. They have destroyed entire farmlands. We are unable to collect grass in sacks for young animals back home, like we used to before the infestation.
The situation is worse in Galkayo, the biggest town in central Somalia. Locals are struggling to contain a new invasion. They are using traditional ways like smoke, stones and noise from pots to chase away the locusts.
The biggest concern is a new migration that is triggered by the wind direction. Our concern is its implication after the rainy season. In December and January, we have seen new waves coming from Bari, northeast and central regions. We have witnessed new migration from Ethiopia.
Last year, authorities declared a national emergency as swamps destroyed large swaths of farmlands across most parts of the country. With the support of the United Nations, Mogadishu acquired helicopters to boost its campaign against the desert locust. The exercise was carried out in 3 regions of Puntland, Galmudug and Somaliland. Meanwhile, authorities are concerned that migrating locusts from neighboring Kenya and Ethiopia will impact recent efforts made by the government in containing the infestation, especially during the next rainy cycle expected in April and May. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
All right, then, so let's examine this particular locust invasion in a bit more crisis across the Horn of Africa. Kenneth Mwangi is a satellite data analyst at the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center. He's live in Nairobi here with us tonight. Ken, thank you for your time this evening. So can you give us a sense of how much vegetation has been destroyed pretty much by the first, I believe it's the first 2 waves of these locust swarms coming in from across the Red Sea into Ethiopia, Somalia and Kenya?
Well, thank you very much. Just to put it in context is that in the first wave, there was less destruction of vegetation, so the quantification was not as much. But in this second wave, we are talking about more than 500,000 hectares estimated of vegetation could have been destroyed alone in Somalia, and not talking about other countries like Ethiopia. So in Somalia alone, and most destroyed are actually the crop areas. Somalia has had a lot of sorghum and a lot of maize affected by the locust, and we are talking of almost about 40% of the farmers have reported such destruction, which means a lot of hectares. Even sometimes difficult to estimate because a lot of on-ground surveys are still going on to actually quantify the full figure of destruction.
Right. Walk us through how this essentially feeds into the food security situation. You've covered what it affects, how it affects farmers in some instances with respect to maize and sorghum, staple crops in that part of the world. But what about the herder side of things? Because a lot of, in this particular part of Africa, a big chunk of subsistence agriculture is basically based in livestock. And if vegetation is being destroyed at this particular scale, I mean, that has some pretty grim implications for food security, doesn't it?
Surely it does. Pastoral is also very much affected, especially now that it's the main source of livelihood in most of Somalia and central Somalia, northern Somalia to say. So our last assessments, which were going on until about October last year, we still had about 75% of livestock farmers in Somalia reporting one form of loss or another. And some of them have had to reduce their herds, and they've had multiple shocks, floods affecting them, washing away their camels, their goats, and this time locusts coming in right after the floods, reducing their ability to restock or even regenerate their herds. So livestock farmers, about 75% of them in central Somalia alone have been affected. Southern Somalia, a bit difficult to assess because of the security situation going on, but central Somalia and northern Somalia have had a lot of livestock affected. Up to 75% of the farmers have reported affected by the desert locust.
Right, one last question for you then, because as you mentioned, this has been a very rough period of time for farmers in Somalia. They've been hit by floods to begin with. Then the worst locust invasion in at least seven decades comes along. When can small-scale farmers ever get back to, for lack of a better word, a normal, quote-unquote, season?
Sorry, I lost you, but if I could hear you, for the small-scale farmers, they've just finished a season of still them being heavily impacted. Basically, 3 of their last seasons from 2019 have had the impact of the locust, and another season is yet to begin in April. They are now in the dry season, right after harvest, which the harvest was affected. So from April again, they are still not sure, because the locusts are currently moving southwards toward Kenya. Conditions are also still very suitable in northern Kenya because of the adequate rain. So we might see a cycle again, and we are not even seeing very soon. We are talking about probably April 2022 is when small-scale farmers in Somalia can probably come back to a normal season, or begin to think of a normal season, if adequate control will be done, especially in parts of Kenya and Ethiopia.
Indeed, that's a fairly grim outlook. Ken Mwangi from IGAD, thank you very much. Now, let's head over to South Africa. The liquor industry in that country has warned of a spike in illicit liquor sales and looming job losses over the country's third ban on alcohol consumptions to stop the spread of COVID-19. South African breweries has approached the courts to declare that ban to be unconstitutional. They're arguing that the loss of livelihoods right across the supply chain will be devastating. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
The liquor industry is a major employer and an important contributor to our economy. Our priority at this time, however, must be to save lives. Reckless behavior due to alcohol intoxication has contributed to increased transmission. Alcohol-related accidents and violence are putting pressure on our hospital emergency units.
Despite the dire economic impact of another ban on alcohol, government decided it needed to be done. The liquor industry is still reeling from the last two bans in 2020. South African Breweries, which produces the bulk of the country's beer, says around 165,000 jobs have been lost. But it's the small traders that have been hit the hardest.
The sad thing is, like, you are not being even noticed. You're not even being given a notice that we are going to close. It's just a shutdown, immediate effect, And you have people, remember it's a new business. So you have people that you need to pay. You have a rent that you need to pay. Your landlord doesn't understand. Workers are frustrated.
Healthcare workers are hoping the ban stays in place as they're battling to cope with the influx of patients suffering with the new variant of COVID. The latest ban took effect just days before the new year, providing some relief to hospitals. South African Breweries has approached the courts to have the ban overturned. The industry believes around 100,000 people moved into poverty as a direct result of the last alcohol ban.
We just want to open because government is not even helping us. Our kids are suffering. Schools are opening very soon. I'm relying on this money. At this given moment, we don't have money. We are even scared that the landlord can take over the business because you don't even have money to pay for the rent.
South Africa has the worst COVID infection rate on the continent, and a vaccine may only arrive in the second quarter of this year. The liquor ban is meant to prevent further deaths, but without an income that puts food on the table, thousands of people might still die without contracting COVID. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigerians, in the meantime, are complaining about a recent hike in retail power prices, which comes barely 2 months after the government implemented a controversial tariff increase. Consumers are now expected to pay over 50% more for power they consume, and this comes amidst a worsening economic downturn, a recession, and of course all the disruption that's been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. As CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam now reports, this tariff hike is already having an impact on individuals and businesses alike.
Mohammed Idris runs this laundry shop in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The 5-year-old business boasts of 6 employees who tend to customers' needs, from washing to spinning, drying and ironing. Each activity is largely dependent on electricity. But the latest hike in electricity tariff is putting Mohammed's business at risk.
Definitely, electricity plays a vital role in our businesses. Initially, if I recharge like 5,000 naira, I can spend like a week, working with the light. But now, currently, I think at most 3 days or 4 days. We try to review the prices, but the customers are complaining bitterly, despite they know the fact that this is what is on ground. People are now looking for alternatives at home.
Small businesses like Mohammed's are facing untold hardship following the COVID-19 lockdown. Many have either closed shop or had their operations and resources cut down. Yet, this is the second time the cost of electricity is going up by as much as 50% and even more.
I think it's very frustrating. Just recently, in fact, on the 23rd of December, I bought 20,000 naira worth of electricity units. Usually that will last me for the entire month or just to the tail end of the month. But in 10 days, I'm telling you, I started getting the beep from my meter. I had to buy another 70 units. Usually I would buy that for about 3,000. Now it cost me over 10,000 to buy that.
A unit that will last for 2 weeks don't even last up to 1 week. So it's terrible. it's actually terrible, it's not bad. They are so inconsiderate.
Economists say the tariff hike is detrimental to the citizens and the economy.
Human beings is very central to the prosperity of any nation. That any economic policy that is insensitive to the welfare of the people is a bad policy. The people will be very strategic in creating wealth for government, in helping the economy to grow. Therefore, this is not for the government to increase electricity tariff, any other tariff, until probably we're able to do away with this, the biting effect of COVID-19 that has ravaged businesses. This is the period for the Nigerian government to incentivize the people, not the period to exploit, Nigerians.
The small and medium-scale enterprises sector is a major driver of the Nigerian economy, contributing to 48% of the country's GDP and 84% of employment. Experts say supporting SMEs is key to economic recovery, but another electricity tariff hike will further snowball into pressures and more hardship for citizens and businesses. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to Zimbabwe now. Sales of gold to the country's sole buyer and exporter of bullion, Fidelity printers and refiners, have fallen by nearly a third to 19 tons last year. That's being attributed to low deliveries from small-scale miners. Analysts are saying that the shortage in hard cash may also have caused delays in payments, and that in turn would force miners to sell their gold to market. That gold deliveries have been on the decline since reaching 33.2 tons back in 2018, mainly due to delays by FPR in paying the miners. In December, the Central Bank of Zimbabwe announced plans to separate FPR into two separate companies and to sell a majority stake in the new gold refinery business to miners as part of broader efforts to boost output. Once upon a time, it was described as Africa's economic miracle, but Ethiopia is now struggling to maintain that status amidst the carnage of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government is distracted by separatist movements in the country's north, and it's now trying to find ways of keeping its economy on track. It's also signalling a deeper commitment to improving the lives of citizens through a 10-year plan. CGTN's Koleto Anjohi has this report from Addis Ababa.
According to the World Bank, Ethiopia's growth rate was at an impressive 8.4% in 2019. But the country is dealing with a heavy economic blow to a country once applauded by the international community for its economic reforms. Now the government insists that it wants its citizens to benefit as individuals, although there are now real questions over whether the country's economic growth can be sustained.
It didn't create enough jobs. Several people were displaced in the name of investment and development. So the problem was only few participated and benefited, and millions were left behind. And again, the second one is the source of growth itself. So the growth that we have registered in the past decade essentially came from public investment, be it in the infrastructure development or other social sector developments, and also projects in the owned by state-owned enterprises.
The government now blames the unequal way in which wealth was distributed in the past on the heavy emphasis on public sector-led projects. The government says that the past decade was characterized by low production and productivity, dwindling export earnings, stubborn inflation, and commercial loans that entailed huge interest rates. Now it wants to change this through a 10-year development plan that gives priority to the private sector.
For instance, in the access to finance, availing infrastructure, the binding constraints, energy, and other sectors. So that's really, really important. For instance, the private sector really wants to see the predictable policies and priority areas. Incentives only won't really work.
The plan is also aimed at attracting foreign investors independently or through public-private partnerships. Sam Rosmarin, an investment expert, says this will mean eliminating the hurdles that have discouraged investors for decades.
A lot of times, companies coming here are expecting that things have been changed rather than things are changing. And I think that misalignment sometimes is frustrating for some investors. Some of the things that I've heard are, access to foreign currency. Of course, it's not a liberalized banking system. Telecoms still being a monopoly. Land and land registration and land access. These, business licensing and registration.
Rosmarin says the beginnings of economic reforms and liberalization, which means opening up certain sectors to the foreign investment, is a good start.
So that's really helpful for investors because I think a lot of investors want to come here and innovate. And when you have a restrictive list, that doesn't allow innovation. So now we have a really good sort of innovative list. Also in recent memory, but not necessarily the last round of revisions, again, was this one-stop shop. So you used to have to go to 5 or 6 different ministries to get your investment approved, to get your business license, to get your staff, to get their work permits, etc. Now you go to one place, it's all handled in one office. They're all trained really well to interface with sort of foreign investors. They know our concerns.
The government says achieving its goal of a private sector-led economy by 2030 will be tough, but it is willing to work on streamlining the path for both domestic and foreign investors in a bid to turn Ethiopia into a middle-income economy. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
At 18:36 GMT, you're watching Global Business. Time for another break. Here's what's coming up. The French president is reviving the push for a Great Green Wall right across the African continent. And China has launched initiatives to boost consumption in order to lay the foundations for future growth.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. These are some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Starting in Nigeria, the military over there says it has killed more than 50 bandits in a village in the northwestern state of Zamfara. This is part of the ongoing efforts to tackle armed robberies, kidnappings and cattle rustling in the northern part of the country. Elsewhere in the Democratic Republic of Congo, militiamen have killed 6 rangers in the Virunga National Park. That attack took place on Sunday. An official at the park says that the identity of the assailants is still not known. A spokesman at the park added that previous attacks have been conducted by assailants seeking to control natural resources in the DRC. To date, over 200 rangers have been murdered there. Further afield, 3 people have been killed, 4 others wounded in a series of shootings in Chicago. Police say the suspects seem to target victims at random, including a 15-year-old girl and a 30-year-old graduate student originally from China at the University of Chicago. He was shot in the head while sitting in his car in a parking garage. The suspect was identified as 32-year-old Jason Nightingale. He died later on in a gunfight with police officers. And finally, Indonesian police have made the first identification of one of the people on board the aircraft that crashed over the weekend. Investigators say the crew did not declare an emergency or report technical problems before the plane suddenly plunged into the sea. Indonesian authorities have pinpointed the location of the plane's data recorders. Search crews have been retrieving wreckage from the Boeing 737, including a turbine, which was handed over to experts as investigators piece together why this plane crashed just minutes after takeoff. That's a run through your headlines. Leaders from around the world are trying to reignite international environmental diplomacy at a biodiversity summit that launches a critical year for efforts to stem the devastating effects of global warming and species loss. Now, momentum on climate and biodiversity stalled last year, partly as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and that's a crisis that experts say illustrates the many dangers, different ones at that, of environmental destruction. The One Planet Summit is a largely virtual event this year, hosted by France in partnership with the UN. The event lays the groundwork for Crunch UN Biodiversity talks that are set to be held in China in October, and they will see nearly 200 nations attempt to thrash out new goals to preserve Earth's battered ecosystems.
In 15 years, the Great Green Wall has had its ups and downs, very clearly. And I also take our share of responsibility for the downs. No doubt we have to put in enough money, political commitment collectively, but I think that today it is part of the responses to the region and more broadly for the African continent. And our objective throughout the day is this battle for biodiversity, but also our efforts against global warming.
The United Kingdom is now under its strictest lockdown ever because of a surge in COVID-19 cases. Many small enterprises are already struggling to survive despite government subsidies, and they don't see things getting any easier in 2021. Yolap Dafford has more from London.
We are very scared. So 2020 was disaster, but 2021 could be much worse.
And that's despite the UK government's recent $7.5 billion support package to try and protect jobs. These chefs are on furlough until the end of April. 80% of their salaries, up to $3,300 a month, are paid by the state. This restaurant, which has retained its Michelin status for 18 years, is now delivering meals or preparing them to be collected.
Since 9 months of closure, with 3 lockdowns, we are always gradually losing money. You lose energy, you lose money, you lose product, because it's perishable, you lose the wine which has been open, so it's everything a loss. So when you addition loss after loss during the year, it's insane.
Farringdon and Holborn streets are usually packed with people. There are lots of offices in this business district. Since March, they've been mostly empty. In this part of central London, pubs and restaurants rely on the workers who commute into this area to work, but also all the other businesses who depend on the daily trade of tens of thousands of workers who normally come here to the heart of London. Shoe shops, dry cleaning businesses, corner stores and restaurants and pubs depend on customers. With a lockdown likely to be enforced at least until mid-February, the government says it's trying to save businesses from going bankrupt.
They will receive up to £9,000 in a one-off cash grant. It's important to remember that comes on top of the existing monthly grants of £3,000 that those businesses receive and the extension of furlough all the way through to April.
Will it be enough? Pascal's company owns 6 restaurants, all with different landlords and rental agreements. 50 staff are on furlough, but another 50 are no longer working.
In springtime, if the customers are not back physically in the restaurant and rent are back to normal, we need to pay the staff normally, you have no more furlough. With no cash behind, we can close. We are all in a very fragile way.
Yolap David, CGTN, London.
China's Commerce Minister says that consumption is going to be a key role in China's domestic economic development. Wang says that the government will take measures to stimulate said consumption. Wang also said that an efficient logistics system can reach every part of the country. The Commerce Minister said the state will work to improve the country's logistics systems and reduce delivery fees. The Commerce Ministry, in the meantime, is also working to optimize China's existing consumer credit system with a view to boosting confidence in domestic consumption.
We will work to unblock the consumption chain regarding big expenditures such as autos, home appliances and furniture. The Commerce Ministry will support subsidies for home appliance replacements and auto purchases by local governments. Firms are encouraged to provide community services, expand e-commerce in rural areas, and develop cold chain logistics for agri-products. They are also encouraged to accelerate digitalization among businesses with 5G and the Internet of Things. The country aims at developing several shopping cities with international fame.
Now, this pandemic, of course, has forced many annual events to be suspended altogether or to move completely or partially online. Now, the annual Consumer Electronics Show, which opens today, and it's normally held in Las Vegas, is one of those that's going fully digital for the first time in its history.
Instead of filling the halls of the Las Vegas Convention Center,
The world's biggest technology conference, the Consumer Electronics Show, has moved online this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. The new digital venue, specially created by Microsoft, will let users message other attendees, schedule meetings, and watch hours of live hosted content and product demos.
And as we look forward to 2022, we're planning a hybrid event, but nothing's certain. I mean, obviously, we'll do the best we can. We have a long runway before 2022 January and our commitment to Las Vegas, and we are looking forward to figuring out how to do the best way possible. In any case, it will certainly look a lot different than the 2020 event in terms of some of the sanitary actions we're taking.
The event switch to a virtual setting was a hard blow for Las Vegas. Like all other U.S. tourist destinations, the city is suffering as people stay home for social distancing.
I can't imagine, just from an economy standpoint and a lingover travel standpoint or the U.S. relation with China standpoint, that it's going to be as big as 2020. But it's multifactorial. COVID's definitely one of the things. The impact on international travel may still be lingering at that point. I don't know. I mean, there also may be legal restrictions at that point, in like who can fly in and fly out. I don't know.
Over 100,000 attendees have registered to take part in the digital event, compared with about 170,000 that attended physically last year, while almost 2,000 exhibitors will be showing their products online. Lin, CGTN.
On to the Middle East now. Saudi Arabia and Qatar recently struck a deal, last week in fact, to end their 3-year diplomatic spat after Saudi Arabia shut its side of Qatar's only land border in June 2017 as part of a package of sanctions. But now businesses from various sectors across both nations are gearing up for a turnaround that has previously been barred by trade and travel embargoes. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar has that report.
Qataris are celebrating the restoration of ties between Qatar and Saudi Arabia following a landmark deal to end the 3.5-year rift. In 2017, Saudi Arabia shut its side of Qatar's only land border. This was part of a package of sanctions deemed as a response to Doha's alleged backing of radical Islamist groups and its closeness to Iran.
When the border with Qatar closed, of course we were economically affected. Qataris used to visit Al-Aqsa on a daily basis and we have family connections with them. So many of them used to visit Al-Aqsa on a daily and weekly basis.
The economic downturn caused by the embargo left many businesses reeling from unexpected losses. Extended families were also divided on both sides, an unintended consequence of a policy meant to hurt Doha's government.
Before the border was shut, we were preparing some clothes and specific items for those arriving from Qatar. The first year after the border was closed, we were severely affected, but after that, we had domestic tourism, which helped in a way, but not as much as relations between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Qataris used to come to Al-Aqsa to buy men's supplies, food and cleaning items, carpets and dishda. They used to buy in large quantities. When Qataris used to come, instead of buying just one piece, they'd buy 5.
Saudi Arabia, along with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt, all agreed to lift the restrictions during the Gulf Cooperation Council summit. Qatar Airways and Saudi Airlines have also announced that they will resume flights between their countries from Monday.
We hope things will return to what they used to be and for markets to boom again. We hope to see Qataris the soonest because so far we have seen none of them.
Qatar has since announced strict coronavirus control measures for those arriving from Saudi Arabia. Travelers will be required to present a negative coronavirus test, undergo another test at the frontier, and quarantine in a government-approved hotel for 1 week. For traders across the borders, they hope that this could be the economic turnaround that they have been waiting for. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
China's authorities are launching a campaign to make major apps and government websites easier to use for the elderly. One particular focus is hailing cabs, which a lot of people in China do now on their phones. It's something that the authorities in Shanghai are trying to make a lot easier. CGTN's Shumeng Shi now reports.
Hailing a taxi on a freezing cold day is not a pleasant experience. And while smartphone users can reduce their weight by placing an online order in advance, those who are less tech-savvy, the older generation, can now enjoy the benefit of digitization. Recently, a new type of taxi-hailing device has popped up on Shanghai's busy streets. And it's kind of smart. It allows me to call a taxi at the press of a button without having to have a mobile phone or putting in my destination.
叔父，您是在多远的范围内能够听到这个呼叫？
差不多1公里左右吧，就是这个 APP 上面，它都有显示。对。
The application, named Shenzhen Travels, is jointly developed by the Shanghai government and Psych Motor, a Shanghai-based automotive company. The Shenzhen Travels app aims to optimize digital ride-sharing services for the elderly, an underserved market that often doesn't have smartphones or finds that using one is too cumbersome. And for those who do use one, the app's interface has features to suit their needs, such as the option of bigger font sizes.
Now this is all you need to do. Just one click here. It's very clear. See? On our platform, people aged 55 years old and above make up about 35% of our total users. From a purely commercial point of view, this is not a smart investment. But as a government project, we have the social responsibility.
China's Ministry of Transport has urged all ride-hailing service providers to optimize their software, make it more convenient for the elderly. Shimengxi, CGTN, Shanghai.
Brief update on commodities as we move into the next session of the bulletin. Platinum essentially starting today's trading session in the red, a decline of around 4% at one point before clawing back some of those losses. It's still above $1,000 an ounce, but only barely. We're just a week, of course, into 2021. Brent futures up by over 7%. Copper over at the London metals market is taking a bit of a breather, decline for the second consecutive trading session. Here's what's coming up next. An all-female DJ academy in Tunisia is opening new doors for women in the entertainment industry in North Africa. Welcome back. A Tunisian DJ, Alpha Arfawi, started working in the field back in 2017. She had been fortunate to find training in Tunis organized by the German Goethe Institute. But once that training program ended, Arfawi couldn't find a space where girls could further develop their skills and learn entirely new techniques. CGTN's Alexander Majala now reports that problem turned out to be quite an opportunity.
Tunisian women say they have long been excluded from the world of turntables and electronic music. But now they flock to a local DJ academy, which will help them launch a career in the creative profession. The academy was founded to try and close the gender gap in the field.
What we wanted to say is that women face more difficulties when they enter the field of electronic music or the arts in general. The difficulties are represented in access to training, information resources and capabilities.
The DJ Academy for Girls trains students, giving them hands-on experience in addition to their theoretical modules to battle stereotypes in the North African country that music mixing can only be performed by men. It was established in 2018 by Arfawi and her partner as a form of protest at the music scene. The academy is the first of its kind in Tunisia and the MENA region.
As a female DJ, of course, my family and I experienced social pressure. But I'm lucky to have a pretty cool family who supported me, were there for me, and respected my choice really. With regards to being a woman DJ and the pressure I had in a field considered as man's field of electronic music in Tunisia, I think we just needed education. We just needed to change our mentality.
Last month, as part of their international 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, Le Fabrique chose 16 students from their courses to perform online to raise awareness on equality and ending violence against women. The Tunisian DJ Academy has taught 50 students in Tunis since its inception and has expanded to include other regions in the country, including a group of trainers and 7 female professionals who are proficient in electronic music as a creative craft and source of income. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And finally, new clothing is coming to the market inspired by origami, and it could help, ideally, the fashion industry not only reduce waste but also help you, parents, save money from having to buy kids' clothes virtually every other quarter. You know how this works with these little guys, they grow essentially like weeds. Now, the company in question is looking to introduce clothes that are designed to adjust to the shape of children as they grow. CGTN's Beryl Oro has that story.
London-based startup Petit Pli, which is French for little pleat, designs children's clothes with an innovative pleat system that lets them grow with the child, expanding in multiple directions but also able to contract back to their original size.
Petit Pli exists because the fashion industry is the world's second largest polluter, and we already know what one of the solutions is, and that is to extend the life and use of clothes, and that's the best way we can reach our carbon, water and waste emission targets by 2030.
According to Yasin, children grow 7 clothes sizes during their first 2 years, meaning parents are left with a lot of clothes that have barely been worn before they are too small for the child.
When I first showed my niece the garment that expands, she was around 3 years old, and so the garments in their condensed state looked too small. And then when I opened it for her, she just gasped with excitement, and I think that element of magic truly captured what innovation can be.
With a background as an aeronautical engineer specializing in deployable structures, Yasin's outfits embed a special structure in fabric that was inspired by the ancient Japanese art origami.
This involved a lot of research into origami structures and folds and stowing away as much material as possible into a small gap and then having that deploy out in space. And that has really filtered down into this design.
Petit Pli featured in 2017's Global Grand Show, which showcases students' ideas for social impact to solve the environmental, social and economic issues facing the world.
What if you could have a garment which has temperature properties which are far beyond what our standard cheap clothing can achieve? What if you could have one garment which really truly does keep you dry and cool in summer and also dry and warm in winter, where it's adapting? Or what if you could have a garment which morphs in its shape for different social situations?
One set of Petit Pli clothes currently fits a child for more than 3 years, growing through 7 distinct sizes before being reset back to the smallest size and passed on to the next infant or sibling. The company is now also experimenting with prints to hide daily stains and exploring adult wear and non-children's wear application. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And finally, a quick run through the currencies here for you. Not much movement with respect to the currencies that we do track. Some interesting developments, however, in East Africa. Kenya announced a few hours ago that it had secured at least $300 million in debt relief from members of the Paris Club. It's a group of about 10 or so sovereign lenders over in Europe. And it's in talks, apparently, to secure another $370 million in debt service relief from non-Paris Club creditors, the biggest of which, of course, would be China. This relief measure, however, just covers bilateral debt. Multilateral debt and commercial creditors are not being touched. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content seen on the programme in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today's